Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinoski, your host. We're sponsored by Cosgrove Content. If you are in any kind of technical business and you struggle to find someone who can write about what you do, look up cosgrovecontent.com. Can help you out. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Jake Manthei. He is president of Aster Brands up in northern Michigan. Jake, welcome. I know you got a great story to tell us.
Yeah, the amazing part is some of it's even true. So I'm happy to be here, and this will be fun.
So quick question. I know I visited you a while ago. I went to two towns. Where are you actually headquartered?
Our main office is in Petoskey, Michigan, but we manufacture all of our products at our mold shop in Charlevoix, Michigan.
Yeah, and both beautiful towns. I'd never been to those specific towns before, been all over Michigan, and finally got there just a month or two ago. And yeah, beautiful day. Nice of you to throw such nice weather for me when I got up there.
You're welcome. Worked hard at it.
And, you know, to me, this is just such a phenomenal story because, you know, it's a tourist area. There's hundreds of thousands of people who go through that area every year, and none of them probably know about the incredible stuff that Aster Brands has going on, right?
Well, that's true. When you live in these small resort towns, in order to make them viable, you have to have a fairly strong, like, commercial industrial base.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's only services. So if you peel the onion back a little bit about our area, there's actually a fair amount of industry here.
Yeah.
But you have to look for it. And we're one of the participants of industry in northern Michigan.
That's a great point. I just read some horror stories a couple of months ago about pure resort towns that struggle to even have people who can live there because the prices get so driven up by all the service activity. And yeah, so having that viable economic base besides the tourist industry is critical.
You have to have it. Our area is often, we use Aspen, Colorado as a benchmark. I mean, we've got all the same kinds of problems that you've read about as you referenced, but the business that we're going to talk about that I'm responsible for, it's kind of interesting. Like there's no strategic reason for us to be located up here.
Right.
This is just where we live and work, and we want to be here. So you got to make it work, and I like it here.
Well, it's such a great story, and we're going to dive into it here in a minute. But how, you know, your forebears landed there on the shore of Lake Michigan, and here you are generations later, not necessarily doing the same stuff, but still doing this entrepreneurial stuff that they kicked off, right?
That is right.
So I guess to start, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, then we can dive into the businesses.
Sure. So a few things about me that I think are maybe interesting. I mean, the viewers will be the judge, but I'm the fifth generation to have grown up in the same house in Petoskey, Michigan. So going way back, our family came over on a boat from Germany and ended up here in Petoskey, Michigan. And as you might imagine, the original farmhouse that they were in looks very different today. But my grandpa, for example, was born and died in that house. My dad lives there currently, and that's where I grew up. So long-term local northern Michigan guy. I'm married for 16 years, have two little girls. They're 6 and 9. So I mean, we're invested in the community. We live here. We're embedded in it. A little bit about how I grew up and came to be in the position that I'm in. We obviously have a multi-generational family business, and there's a whole bunch of us in my generation. And my take, looking back, you know, on childhood and stuff, is we never knew we had anything. In fact, I was thinking about this earlier this morning. My dad would always complain, oh, we never have any money and all these things that lots of business people do, right? Yeah. Well, my younger brother, I thought this was hilarious. He took that to heart when he was a little kid. And never told my folks he needed a new pair of shoes. If you look at his feet, he's got these gnarly toes because he wore the same pair for so many years it like made them all crooked. So like
Holy
that's
cow.
that's a true story. So like that's a little bit of an indicator into the environment that we grew up in. And what that meant was when we were really little, it was every night you'd get home from school and have a big long list of chores. Every weekend you're out working in the yard. At the tender age of 11 to 12, when you were strong enough to carry a shovel or a rake, we were out on our heavy contracting crews. I've got a lot of hours as a top man putting water main in the ground and raking topsoil and backfilling foundations for our heavy contracting business. And so just every spring break, every summer, we worked hard all the way through, middle school, high school, and college. And we were always told, if you guys work hard and go to school, there's going to be opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think my dad's generation knew what that meant. And we certainly didn't know what it meant. But what we did was listen and work hard and went to school. And then when the time was right, we worked our way. I'm using the term we because there's a number of people in similar positions as me in our family enterprise. We found a hole, somebody left, or there was an opportunity, and we would just jump in and dig in and work hard. And eventually, when the time was right, we found ourselves in positions of a lot of responsibility. And then a couple of years ago, we came up with a way to buy out our parents' generation. And we've continued to your point, we have not done what they did. What we've tried to do is pick up where they left off. Right. Which is kind of a different, those are two very different ideas. So we've tried to use the enterprise as a platform from which to grow and scale. So that in brief is kind of how I ended up where I'm at, and a little bit of insight into our family's culture.
Yeah, and I think it's really telling when you talk about your family's culture, how you even approach that discussion of yourself as not, I'm the president of this powerful group of companies, but here's how I grew up and grew into what I'm doing. But now let's talk about that powerful group of companies, because to me, it's just such an amazing and an amazingly rich story.
So what you'll find is we are far from the biggest family business that you'll find, but we're on the top of the heap for complexity, which is not a compliment, right? There's issues that come with that, and anybody watching who's in a family business, I know, can empathize with that. But my dad's generation had three brothers that went into business together, and then they have three cousins that went into business together. So there's six of them, and they all had big families. So there's lots of us in my generation. And so there's this constant struggle with, okay, how do you get it to the next generation? Do you want to get it to the next generation? Not everybody is designed to lead a business. That's not a good or a bad. Like it comes, leading a business, a lot of people look at it, you use the word power. There is some of that. There's also a lot of burden. There's sleepless nights. There's a lot of responsibility. There's like, man, if I make this decision and it goes bad, there's families' lives at stake. I mean, there's a lot to it. So anyhow, there's a bunch of us, and some of us decided that we wanted to pursue a lot of responsibility in the company. So long story short, what the Manthei Group, if you want to read about it, it's called mantheigroup.com, is kind of our enterprise. There's 5 business units. Aster Brands is one of the 5. That's what I lead. The 5 business units, last year, I think we did about 110 million in sales, have about 400 employees. Most of it's in Northern Michigan, but not all. I'll unpack the 5 units, and then we can go into detail on Aster Brands. Our original family business, and the only one that went, that I am technically a 3rd generation, my grandpa and his brother founded, is called Manthei Wood Products. And it makes high-end maple hardwood veneers, wood veneers. We have probably one of the most, if not the most sophisticated rotary veneer lathe in North America. And then recently we got into putting that up into our own plywood, and that business is growing incredibly. And that business has been kind of a whipsaw. It burned down in 1967, and then again in 2017, which is about the time we took over. When these big things happen, that's when the older generation says, this sounds like an opportunity, right? And that's where we tend to jump into the fire, literally, and then figure out how to rebuild. And I mean, which is exactly how my dad's generation found itself operating the mill after the first fire. So that's the first business unit. The second one is heavy contracting. We build roads, underground utilities. We have sand and gravel pits all over northern Michigan. We have ready mix concrete plants, and that's what got us into concrete products. And out of that, we developed our Ready Rock and Rosetta brands, which we manufacture those concrete products. And then what we learned a long time ago, if you're familiar at all with northern Michigan, we learned a long time ago, very few people live up here, right? So we like invented these products, we're making them, we're selling them locally, and we're like, okay, if we're going to really grow, we've got some good ideas, we think. We need to go to where people live. And that's what launched business unit number 3, which is Aster Brands, which is we learned how to patent those ideas and build brand and build networks. So concrete's heavy, you can't truck it very far. So we figured out, well, let's sell the manufacturing equipment for the stuff that we invented. That's what Aster Brands does. If you were to ask in one sentence, what is your business? Aster Brands is a sales, marketing, and intellectual property company that manufactures business opportunities for concrete producers. That's what Aster Brands is. That's what I lead. So we've got a pretty robust IP portfolio. We've got a substantial marketing group. We have a sales staff scattered throughout the globe, and we're all trying to, we do four things. We try to sell new business opportunities to new accounts, the new concrete producers. Once they team up with us, we work with them really closely to brand and sell the product in their local deal to grow market share. Yeah. So if we're manufacturing a business opportunity, the manufacturing is the equipment that we sell. You have to have a customer locally to make it because you can't truck very much concrete from northern Michigan. So you have to have local guys, and we have about 200 of them making it in 24 or 5 countries or something now. Wow. Yeah. Then you have to help grow the market share. Then if you've done those things well, the third thing that we do is we innovate. We have a robust innovation team that we're constantly cycling through new products, filing new patents. We have a state-of-our industry structural test frame and material science lab and stuff. We're always experimenting with new things that we can take to the market because we've set up enough customers that have grown market share. We've earned their trust. It's a mutually beneficial deal. They've got a profitable business, and then we can roll new things to that sales channel. And then what we work really hard to do is become a great place to work. When you live in these small towns, you've got to work really hard on culture to attract and retain top talent. I think we've done a pretty good job at that, and we have a long way to go at it as well, but we can unpack that more. So that's what Aster Brands is. And then the last 2 business units are, this one's going to sound very unrelated. We've got a number of resort, RV, and mobile home resorts in the southwestern United States, Southern California, and Arizona right now. And that goes, the second generation started that, and we've acquired some more properties since then to start to scale it. And then the 5th one is a commercial real estate business where we, as companies spin off cash, we put it into the real estate group and buy income properties around America. So that's kind of a snapshot about the Manthei Group, our portfolio, and what we do.
So, for me, coming from the manufacturing world, it was just so enthralling to see the stuff you do in the manufacturing side. So both the manufacturing of the concrete products themselves, the blocks, amazing things, gorgeous things. You definitely should go out and check out what Ready Rock does out there. That's what first caught my eye and got me in touch with Jake. But then, making the machinery to make those things, like you said, you're licensing that out across the world and providing opportunities for other precasters, concrete folks. And that, to me, is the bigger business story here. You talk about all those different elements of the business and how you guys have adapted and adjusted and made this into a thriving concern. And I love the history here because, to me, that's what goes right back to your forebears who came over here and them establishing their business and having a couple of strange turns and going into things almost by accident. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So what Jim's talking about is like, how did all of this start, right? So what happened is when the great-great-grandparents came over from Germany, they didn't have anything. but they had a little piece of land. It was about so what my great grandma Constance did was, and this sounds like something any one of us in my generation would do. She read an article in a magazine about how to raise and commercially raise and cut flowers, a specific flower called an aster. That's why we're Aster Brands now.
Yeah.
It's a variety of mum, is my understanding. So she started a small flower farm. She'd raise them, and then she would cut them, package them, and then drive them to Detroit to sell. And that was not something that was like to become a great business person, and it was a means to provide for the family. They just didn't have a lot. She was the original entrepreneur. So that's how my grandparents grew up in that environment. Didn't have a lot, so they kept the flower thing going. And actually, I take that back. They didn't keep they kept the farming thing going. They started a bean farm, of all things. So they were doing beans, and one year there was a lot of people doing beans. There was just a huge crop of beans. And so what happens when there's an oversupply is the price tanks. So they had a bunch of stuff, they couldn't sell it, everybody's just lowering the price. Ted and Ernie, my grandpa and his brother, they were like, you know what we're going to do next year? Everybody's going to switch from beans because it was bad. What we're going to do is grow beans because nobody else is going to. So then the price went way up, and then they were the only guy with beans, and then they got into a higher margin crop of strawberries, and they were growing it. Obviously, it's very seasonal up here. We get brutal winters. So they said, okay, what can we do in the winters? They bought a machine to make their own wood berry box equipment. They bought the wrong stuff, and it was a commercial veneer lathe to make 4x8 sheets of plywood, like the face veneers. So the idea was, oops, well, let's make veneer now. So they spent the better part of their career growing the veneer business. And then when that burned down, that's when my parents' generation, they came back and said, we have this insurance money coming back. We don't want to operate it. They were getting, in their mid 60s. And they said, if you guys want to operate it, we'll help you financially to get it started. And that's when they put, at that time, all the state-of-the-art equipment, and they were all just getting out of college and went and scaled it way up. So that was kind of the origin of our family and business. But something to take away there is there's just, I don't know, what's the one-liner? Necessity breeds invention or something like that. There's a one-liner. It didn't come out right, but I mean, that's what it was. It's not just, it's not, none of us went to Harvard Business School and are super intellects. It's just like, let's go out and work hard every day, and if you do that and grind on it long enough, then good stuff has happened,
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of it in spite of ourselves. I mean, if you get to know us, we're it's not like we're far from the smartest people you're ever going to meet. And frankly, that's why we have 5 business units. We're not smart enough to build one big one. So we start a lot of little ones. And so, I mean, that's what we do. That's how it started.
But you obviously have a sense for getting close enough to customers to know what their needs are, and you're smart enough to figure out a way to fulfill those needs, right?
Well, that's one of the fun things about what I get to do at Aster Brands. This is what I love, is when you build a network, which is what I like to think we've built. We have these producers of our products scattered all over the globe now. You end up getting a really interesting and granular sense for regional economies and how the needs are different. And then you end up not just having customers, but friends all over the place. So what we've tried to do is cultivate that to create community among our customers. We have events, everybody comes together, and they come there, I like to think, because we create good content for them, give them a purpose to come. But what we find over the years is every time we do our events, they show up for the content to grow their business because we make business opportunities, but the value they get is during the breaks talking to their peers. So, I mean, as a result of that, we've got customers that didn't know each other prior that are close personal friends now. They travel together, go on vacation together. And when you can tap into the community part of that, you can start to get really good customer insights from your friends. they'll tell you like real stuff. It's like, okay, what are the needs in your area? What are the problems that everybody keeps asking you for that you don't have an answer to? So out of that, we created a pretty good project level technical support team to work with our customers. So what happens then is we log all this data as we're looking at projects, trying to solve complicated problems. So like right now, we're actively talking to folks down in Florida, which we can talk about. We started a fourth brand, which is a vertical integration, a plant in North Florida. And we're down there actively talking to business owners, like knocking door to door on these devastated coasts saying, how can we help you? Because our products will hold up to these hurricane force winds on the coast and stuff like that. And so what that does when you're out doing those kinds of things, say, hey, listen, there's a reoccurring problem. How can we use our technical team of mechanical and civil and structural engineers, our test frame, our material science lab to meet the need of a market? And then once you find those things, you can roll it into a product and roll it through a network of 200 companies making concrete products in 25 countries. So I love that part. It's super interesting. It's like the network effects, and you're working with fun, interesting people cross-culturally, and it's really cool.
It's amazing. Just yesterday, I published a story in Forbes about Case Construction Equipment. I went and visited a place in Tomahawk, Wisconsin on a gorgeous day a couple months ago, and got to drive an excavator and a bulldozer that is a brand new development. And that was the focus of that trip, is they've got this customer center up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin where they bring all these people together, just like you're talking about. And the idea for this bulldozer came out of those connections that they make like that. You know, it's this combination of a skid steer and a regular bulldozer that kind of does the jobs of both and can use all the different tools and everything. And that innovation opportunity when you get those kinds of connections and that community is amazing. It's such an enormous business story, business idea.
It's an opportunity rich environment when you can tap into that. And at the same time, it's not I don't think of it as a transaction. Like, here's a tactic to get guys to talk. It's just people you've gotten to know that have common business stories, and you become friends with them. And then in that space, you find alignment. Like, they have a problem, we have some people that can figure out how to solve them, and then you turn it into a business opportunity. What happens? Those guys grow their business, hire more people, create more jobs. But guess what? So do we. So it's a very mutually beneficial thing. Just like what you described. If Case taps into that and comes up with a new innovation, the contractors are going to win, but so is Case. It's a great model.
Well, it's interesting too, because you think about things we've lost as a society, and that sense of community has just been driven away in so many different ways. And in the business world, I always call it MBA disease, focusing everything on dollars and cents and everything else is waste. Well, no, it's not. Building community and building those relationships, not to make money, but because that's what humans ought to do as good people, still delivers for the business.
Oh, consistently. And I don't have an MBA, but I did go to business school for undergrad. And one of the things that I remember learning about is industry consolidation, right? So which is a predictable, reoccurring phenomenon throughout industry. The case study that they used, I went to Arizona State. It's cold here in the winter, so I wanted to go somewhere warm for a while. So I went. Somebody recently told me ASU was the Harvard of the West, which made me happy because it is not Stanford. But anyway, I'd never heard that before. So anyhow, I mean, that you learn about this industry consolidation, and on one hand, there's nothing wrong with it. These big companies have proven a very incredible economic model that works. But in that space, when the consolidation happens, it creates a bunch of opportunity. There's consolidation happening throughout the industry that we're in. What happens is you get a really big focus on very clear and specific areas, and the ball gets dropped on taking care of contractors and the smaller opportunities. So the smaller middle market stuff, I love that. It's still kind of fragmented. In that, you can try to organize a little bit of fragment, and there's tons of opportunities there.
Interesting. Yeah.
Said another way, I'd be a horrible person to work for a huge company. I love this small stuff.
Yeah. Good. Well, so let's talk about that now. The businesses that you run, what are the big opportunities now? What are the things that you're working on currently and for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in the big picture, we focus on the four things that I mentioned. We call them the four paths to growth: new customers, market share growth, innovation, and great place to work. So we're doing things in all four of these. I kind of think you can apply those four things to just about any business. But
Yeah.
so for new customers, we over the last number of years have made an aggressive push into growing our business in outside of North America. So we now have employees in Western Europe and France and in Spain, and we're actively, pretty rapidly growing throughout Europe, but we're also in New Zealand and Australia and some other spots as well. So we're actively trying to grow our footprint elsewhere. Part of our business model means that we have this IP portfolio, but what we actually do is sell a territory. So once you sell a territory, it's sold. So that forces us to innovate. If you want to continue to grow, you need a new brand. So you can start in a different product category, different sectors, so you can sell the territory again. But then the globe's pretty big. So now there's issues with that. Obviously, what's top of mind is all the inflation stuff. Europe's probably already in a recession. So when you look at market share growth, when things start to switch to the backside of the business cycle, the way we like to think, which is probably pretty primitive because we're this podunk little town up north, but the way we like to think is when folks start to do big cuts, that's when we spend money to accelerate innovation and spend money on marketing to grow our market share. So like Europe, for example, I think there's an opportunity to commercialize a new, this is an innovation, but it's not a product innovation. Our product category, our Ready Rock brand in particular, which is large scale retaining wall blocks. Think of them like 2,000-pound Legos. They all interlock, they all set together, but you set them with machines, right?
Right. Yep.
So in Europe, that's a new product category. So we came out with and we're just now taking it to market. It's pretty much an engineering textbook for here's all the data on how to design gravity retaining walls. Now you can get this information without our textbook, but it comes from 20 different sources and you've got to be around it for a long time. We tried to consolidate it all with real examples, real calcs, real test scenarios, real testing data out of the lab and all the stuff. So if you have an area like a Europe or somebody that's open in a new product category, we're trying to get into the engineering associations, universities to go commercialize that. And if you do that for long enough, I think that's a good way to build brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're doing similar things stateside, but like we're with the American Society of Civil Engineers. We have a WebEx to their entire audience to roll this out here in just a couple of weeks. So that's an example of some things that we're working on. Our innovation team on the product side has a pretty robust list of things ranging from innovation projects. If you talk to everybody in our industry, including this showed up in the 2022 survey from the National Precast Concrete Association, probably won't surprise anybody that it watches this podcast, but the number one issue in that sector is getting enough employees. And the number two issue is if you're fortunate enough to get them, it's retaining them, right? So what we're trying to do is look at all of our product categories and say, okay, how do we take labor out of the process? How do we output up with less labor? So we're about to ship our first product for our Rosetta brand. It's a machine that will position us to be able to demold a bunch of stuff with less labor. So that's an example. Like we have this Innovate, Automate, Train initiative. This is part of like a mix between, it's an innovation to automate, right? And then we have a number of other product categories that we're actively working on that I probably shouldn't talk about just yet.
You don't have to give us all your secrets.
Keep an eye on us. We've always got new stuff coming out, but we've got some new stuff behind the scenes that if we work hard at it, maybe they'll work.
I am writing down that Innovate, Automate, Train because that's another one that's an idea that cuts across everything that is going on in the business world these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean that again, when you target like the smaller middle market stuff, I think there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to get into like making iPhones, like that's just a different level of automation and sophistication stuff. I don't know how to do that. So we
Right.
stick into these kinds of things that like we know something about, we know how to win in them. And so that's what we're working on.
Cool. So one thing I did want to touch on, and you kind of got into it there in your intro conversation, but you talked about all the family members involved in this business. And when I was up there, we chatted about this, how you hear these horror stories of generation 3, that's where the wheels come off, and family-owned businesses just lose it and go under. How is your family, your businesses, how have you guys avoided that trap?
That's a good question. So this is part of we're far from the biggest family business, but we're the top of the pile for complexity. What I mean there is just our family is really, really big.
Yeah, you
oftentimes,
may not be the biggest dollar-wise, but you may be the biggest family.
Right. Usually, I'll say it like this. When we started to have serious conversations about how do we actually transfer businesses to the next generation, which is a very hard conversation to have. I mean, there was an expectation set by what we call Gen 2. If you work hard, if you go to school, if you show aptitude and you're good at what you do, there will be opportunity. They didn't know what it meant, neither did we. But you get to a certain point where it's like, boy, they wanted to be able to slow down. We were looking to speed up, and the conversation shifted kind of organically. So what we did was, one of the things that I learned, I helped spin this thing up in our family. I didn't know this prior, but there are these things in universities all over the country called family business centers. I had no idea that was a thing. So we found one. Again, we live in Northern Michigan. None of these resources are in Northern Michigan because nobody lives here. Yeah. So we found a top tier family business center in Chicago at Loyola University. So I reached out to them. I did it myself, started talking to them. They gave me some books to read. And then they started giving me like, here's somebody you should talk to. They're 15 years ahead of you in this process. Here's another person to talk to. I went to a couple conferences, and then what we did was have their key person, their top couple people come up and lead our whole family. There's probably 150 people there or something. Through a training on family business. Now you would think we would know something about family business, but because we've been doing it forever. But what I learned is there's just tons of resources about how best practices on how to transfer generations, and how every generation has a different culture. It's predictable, it's recurring, it's repeatable. It was super interesting for me. So we started learning as a family about these things, going to conferences and interviewing other families that were further ahead of us. And then what we did was bring on, not a huge fan of consultants, but we found this group called the Family Business Consulting Group. And we brought a guy in that for several years, and we would meet, I forget now, every 6 weeks or so. And we'd bring him in, and we started knocking down hard things. Family executive compensation, dividend policy. I mean, the things that, like the detail stuff that nobody wants to work on because it affects lifestyles. And I don't know how we started working through those things. And then when the time came to actually do the transfer, there were, as you might imagine, there's a ton of details. So what we did was take each of our 6 families and roll each family's equity into an LLC and install an LLC manager. So like I'm the manager for our family. So you still have like voting, right? Like I get to vote on behalf of our family's equity in the enterprise. So that's how we're managing a really big group of people with a small number. And that gets into governance and all these kinds of things. But that's the technical stuff that people find interesting. That's not what it takes to get to the, I mean, you have to have that. I guess it's part of what it takes to get to the next thing. But if you really want to, at least in our experience, what got us to the point where our generation was able to continue to work hard and do well, a lot of people want to go become a sculptor or do something that's not, grinding it out, working 60 hours. Like that is a family culture thing that my parents' generation, I think, just did really well. Like my brother's story with the shoes. None of us knew we had anything. Now we didn't, it's not like we had it hard, but we were just like, boy, we got to go work. I mean, that was the culture. And that worked really well for some, and some others it kind of turned them off, but which is going to happen. So that in a nutshell, that's how it worked. Gen 2 did a really good job in that space, but it wasn't just work ethic. What they did a fabulous job of that transferred through quite a few in our generation, that isn't even a business thing, but I think is really the glue that holds it together. Or if you're a big Lebowski fan, it's the rug that ties the room together. What they have, and it came from their parents' generation, is a deep-seated faith, biblical faith. So like the values in that of treat others like you want to be treated, have integrity, do the right thing when nobody else is looking, teamwork. Like there was a certain set of biblical-based values that in giving back that was embedded in our family's culture. That's the glue that ties it together. So like even in our generation, I have a meeting later today that the purpose of the meeting is to talk about not how to dividend more so you can have a nicer house, but how do you use the business enterprise as a platform missionally. So like as an example, in my family, we've gotten pretty involved with a group called Orphan Helpers, which works with juvenile detention centers in Latin America and Honduras and El Salvador, and these super high crime rate gang cultures. And we support them financially. We've gotten involved. I've been there a bunch of times. What we try to do is walk with these people so they come out of that environment, this juvenile detention center, with an employable skill, entrepreneurship training, so they can come out and go add real value and not get in trouble. And there are phenomenal success stories that we could go into about that kind of. That's why we do business. And it's not just to go grow the thing to have a nicer house. It's not about me. It's like how do you use the platform to give back? And if you can focus on the purpose, and this is really why our fourth path to growth is be a great place to work. The purpose statement for Aster Brands is to change the world in a concrete way. We can tell a really good story about our products, how we've made a physical mark on infrastructure and backyards all over the globe. But if you peel the onion back, it's a deeply relational comment where we're trying to treat others the way we want to be treated and use our platform to do something bigger than ourselves. It's not, I like my house. I don't need a bigger one. You know, that's not the purpose.
That's all phenomenal stuff. I was a little worried, not that it was a bad thing that you started with the schools and the consultants, because I do say that the true expert is the guy who realizes how little he knows. But I was worried that you weren't going to talk about family culture. So I'm glad you did get to that, because I was going to point out, I went up there and we sat down in one of your plants and chatted for a while there in the morning. And I heard this from you during that discussion. And then we went and visited your dad up at the farmhouse. And I heard it from him as well. What you just said is, I don't need a bigger house. It's not why we do this. And that family culture of teaching the new generation to work for what they want and not to get high and mighty, and to understand that it's not about them and it's not about the next biggest and brightest thing. It's about really making a contribution in this world. And I applaud you guys for that.
Well, it's not because I did anything so great. I mean, you end up being born into a family that has those kinds of values, and it rubs out. I mean, that's why every one of us to a person will tell you, and it's heartfelt and genuine, we're blessed beyond ourselves. None of us deserve this, but at the same time, there's nothing you can do about the position that you're in. So you can choose to make something out of it, and that's what we're choosing to do. So
it's all about what are you going to do with what you've been given.
That's exactly right. So we see it as stewardship. I mean, these things aren't like, it's not like it's mine, it's how do you steward the resources that you've been blessed to steward and do the right thing.
Well, and you can be humble about it, and I appreciate that, but you were taught something by your parents who were taught something by their parents, and what's incumbent on you and me is to continue that line, right? Is to convey that to the next generation.
Absolutely. Yep. That is a very true story. If you stick around, my kids are pretty little. They're 6 and 9. They haven't hit the 11 to 12 to be given the shovel yet, but there's some older kids that you'll see doing the same stuff I did when I was a kid. They're out, on construction crews and doing some stuff. It's really great.
Excellent. Well, we're getting toward the end of our time. Is there anything we haven't hit on that's important we talk about?
Oh, you used my favorite question on me. What haven't we talked about that, or what haven't I asked that I should have? Well done. I guess one thing that I will say is that on the family business story, something that I mentioned, that when we got involved with the Loyola Family Business School, they gave us a list of families and companies to reach out to talk to that were further ahead than we were. That was invaluable. So if there's anything that the viewers here heard and we can be helpful for, we'll return the favor. Let us know, give us a call. We'd be happy to share our experience. And now I told Jim this when it came up, we'll show you what we have, but we'll tell you more than we know. So use that as your filter when you hear the feedback. But we're happy to share our experience and connect some dots if you find it might be helpful.
Wonderful. Well, Jake, a true pleasure, getting back together. I do have to tell you that day up with you guys was very memorable and enjoyable. And now we've got work to do because we're also going to put together a story for my Forbes.com column. So I'll be in touch shortly. In the meantime, thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. Anytime. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.